Hi, Jessica here. Welcome back to My Transgender Nation. Today, we have an interview with Gabrielle Claiborne. Welcome, Gabrielle.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm so excited about being with you today.
I've been looking forward to doing this interview. This is going to be fun. Gabrielle is a co-founder and CEO of Transformation Journeys Worldwide, an inclusion training and consulting firm with a transgender focus. She travels extensively helping cutting edge organizations position themselves to attract and retain the best talent. Gabrielle has been out an active trans woman since 2010. She served on the executive board of the Atlanta Pride for the past 5 years and currently serves as co-chair of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce TGX initiative. You'll have to tell us about that. And co-chair of the Trans Affairs Committee on the City of Atlanta's LGBT Mayoral Advisory Council, as secretary of the Out Georgia Business Alliance, as chair of the Out Georgia Business Alliance's TGX 360 Workplace and Entrepreneurial Incentive and Advisory Board member of the Outfront Theater Group. Woof. She's also done TEDx and written a book, Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity. So we have lots to talk about with Gabrielle.
Thank you, Jessica.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad we're doing this. So I thought we could start with you telling us about your personal journey and deciding to come out as a transgender woman and what that's been like for you and along those lines, if you would.
Yeah, it's how much time do we have?
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know we could write. That's a book. There you go.
Well, that is my book. A lot of it, Jessica, as is the case for many of us, it's not a straight line, right?
Sure.
There are a lot of moving parts and pieces. There are a lot of nuances. There are a lot of complexities and invitations along the way that ultimately lead us to our what I call our most highest and best self, our most authentic self. And I know for me, when I was a very young child, because this was long before the days of the internet, and because I grew up in a very conservative faith tradition home, I was a Pentecostal preacher's kid, a fourth generation Pentecostal preacher's kid. I didn't have the language to understand what was going on inside of me. So consequently, in living and growing up in that space, I was dealing with a lot of guilt and shame about what was going on inside of me. And so I did exactly what culture expected a cisgender heterosexual male to do. I got married to a beautiful woman. I had 3 amazing kids, a very successful career in the construction industry for 30 plus years. I was a leader in a large church here in the Atlanta area. So if you looked at my life on the outside, you would say this person has life by the tail. But in reality, I was living a life of turmoil because of this internal gender dilemma that was going on inside of me that I still had no words to describe to myself, let alone anyone else. And then the internet came on the scene. And when I was searching the internet in my mid-40s, I accidentally stumbled across a website that showed pictures of trans women. When I saw this, Jessica, I thought, oh my goodness, that is me, right? That's me. But then, I had this, once I had this sensation of that's me, I then had this sinking feeling of despair, as I can never live my life as me, as this person. What would my family think? What would my church think? Right. So I spent the next 5 years or so doing online research, living between the exhilaration of knowing that's me and the reality of saying, I could never do that. I could never be that person. But it was after 5 years of doing this and living in this intense turmoil, I finally decided to get help. Thank God for the internet. It was during that time that I found a woman here in Atlanta that actually owned a dressing service. And I mustered up the courage to call and make an appointment with her. And on the day of the appointment, as I'm going to her home, I was just a hot mess. But as soon as I was greeted at the door by her and she ushered me upstairs to her dressing salon, I thought I had died and gone to heaven, because it was rooms of dresses and shoes and wigs and jewelry and drawers of lingerie. And so over the next few hours, her name was Ramona. Ramona worked her magic, and she dressed me head to toe in my true feminine gender expression. Now, this whole time that she was working her magic, she was standing between me and the mirror, so I wasn't able to see what was actually taking place. And when she was done, she looked at me and she says, "Gabrielle, are you ready?" Well, Jessica, I have to tell you, I was scared to death, but excited at the same time. And I said, "I think so." She said, "Okay." And at that moment, she stepped away from the mirror, and there, the very first time I saw myself on the outside as the person I knew I was on the inside.
Wow.
I was 49 years old and meeting myself for the very first time.
Wow.
It was then, Jessica, I knew.
Yeah.
That's me. So that set me on the course, Jessica, of taking some very scary and courageous steps of, showing up authentically in the world. That involved, as it does for many of us, it involved me coming out to my family, to now my ex-wife and my grown kids, to my parents and my sister, to my friends, to my workplace,
Yeah.
to my spiritual community. I mean, when you start thinking about all the different ways that a transition like this touches your life,
Yep.
there are a lot of things to navigate. And as you can imagine, my world was turned upside down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I lost
How
everything.
old were your kids when you decided to transition?
My kids were in their early to mid 20s. And this was like almost 12 years ago now.
Yeah. And you have 3 kids, you said, right?
I've got 3 grown kids.
And did all of them take to it well, or did you have a mixed bag there?
No, it's, it depends on, folks all the time, they ask me, "So Gabrielle, how's your kids been with your transition?" I said, "It depends on what day you ask me."
Ah, okay.
Because, as much as this has been my journey, Jessica,
Yeah.
it's their journey as well. And
Sure.
it's even more so their journey, because I have had years to grapple what has been going on in the background, right? And when I came out, it would have been unreasonable for me, excuse me, to expect my family to turn on a dime, because I was just dropping this on them. And for my kids, for my ex-wife, for my family, my parents and my sister, they immediately said, "Well, what does this mean for me?" Not me, for them, right? What does this mean for them?
Yep.
Who are you? I thought I knew you. All of a sudden, you're like, you're saying this is who you are?
Yeah.
How long have you known this? Why did you not come out sooner, right? And so it's been a journey. It has been a journey of loving them from a distance a lot of times.
Sure.
Giving them space to grieve and to, get angry and to process things, and to, to understand that to a degree, to some extent, there's an aspect of the person that they knew has kind of been lost, right? I mean, for me to show up authentically now, for example, things like, days throughout the year that we celebrate significant milestones. For example, how do we do Father's Day now? Are you still our dad? What do we call you now, right? So it's these kind of difficult conversations and these difficult dynamics that we have to navigate as gender diverse individuals, depending on where we are in our life, right?
Sure.
So, and so this set me on the course of finding what was mine to do. Like I said, I lost everything. I was homeless. I was fired from my job. I was alienated by friends, alienated by my spiritual community. And I had to basically start my life over at 50
Oh my.
again.
Oh my. Oh
I mean,
my.
there was a season when I lived in a Section 8 housing complex because that's all I could afford.
Wow.
I didn't have a job, and I was just doing odds and ends just to survive. And because I was an entrepreneur for much of my life, I fell back on my entrepreneurial experience and started a cleaning company and a home renovation company. And for a season early in my transition, that worked for me, right?
Yeah.
But as I continued stepping into my own authentic self, showing up in those spaces really didn't resonate for me anymore. So this was an invitation for me to find, what is mine to do in the world? What kind of legacy do I want to leave, not only for my family or for my spiritual community, but for the world, right? What kind of legacy do I want to leave? And that's when my business partner and I co-founded Transformation Journeys Worldwide, which is an inclusion training consulting firm with a transgender focus. So, and this is like 7 years ago. So we help a number of organizations navigate their own journeys around creating inclusive cultures for trans and gender expansive individuals. But the one thing I think the one important lesson that I've learned in all of this is, as it relates to my family, is especially my kids, is that for so many years I was showing up inauthentic in front of them, and I didn't realize that until I got courageous enough and came out and embraced my truth as a transgender woman. And as I continued leaning into that and showing up more authentically, my kids came to me and said, "You're a better parent now because you now are not hiding who you have been all along." And when my kids shared that with me,
Yeah.
it showed me the power of authenticity. For many of us who are grappling, and I know that those who may be listening to this conversation, Jessica, may be at different places in their own personal journey,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Wherever you are in your journey, just know that your creator, I'm going to use that word, your creator wants you to live your life authentically. Yes. I'm not saying that this journey has been an easy one, but I can tell you that it has been one of complete joy, life-giving power, and world-changing purpose, right, for me. And so anything that's worth doing is going to have its challenges, right? So I'm not suggesting that it's going to be challenge-free, but I am affirming that as you continue on your journey, your individual journey of authenticity, you're going to find what is yours to do, and you're going to feel like, why didn't I make this decision so much sooner, right?
Amen. Did you find that any of your family members or close friends felt like once you had told them you were trans and you came out to them, did any of them feel like because you hadn't brought it up sooner that you had been lying to them?
Oh yeah, one of the first things that my now ex-wife told me when I came out to her is, well, then that means our marriage has been a lie all along.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I said, no, that's not the case at all. I said, I love you, and I still love my ex because we have a beautiful family together. We spent a lot of good years together, and I loved her, and I still do love her. But the form of the relationship has just changed. And even though I came out, some 20, 25 years after I said I do to my wife,
Yeah.
it doesn't. And even though I wasn't authentic to her, let alone myself or anybody else, it doesn't mean that all the time that we spent together was a lie. That's not it at all. It was just that I was trying to find the courage and the space to finally say yes to me.
Yeah.
And for some trans individuals, their spouses are able to navigate this transition with them. And I totally respect and value that. There are other relationships that don't aren't able to navigate this type of transition, because here's the thing, me transitioning, not only it challenged my wife from the perspective of, well, I never married a woman, so what does this mean about my sexual orientation? This makes me a lesbian. I'm not a lesbian. I'm attracted to heterosexual men, right? So my transition introduced some challenges into her own life that she had to grapple and come to terms with, which she has.
Are you on good terms with her at this point in your transition?
I am happy to say, yes, we are actually good friends right now.
That's a good thing. That's cool.
And I was very intentional in the process of transitioning and leaving home and giving family space to navigate, what this meant for them. I was very intentional in allowing her to basically purge all of her emotions, because she had a lot of pinned up emotions about my transition. And even about, to your earlier question, what does the last 20, 25 years mean to me?
Yeah.
And so I had to give her space to navigate that and process that and grieve that. And I will tell you, Jessica, early on in the process, it was not pretty.
Yeah,
there were a lot.
There were that, so I
Yeah,
totally understand
right?
that. That's for sure.
A lot of difficult conversations,
Yeah.
right? And most of those conversations were me listening and her talking.
Yeah.
So
if you don't mind me asking this one, we can pass by it if it's too personal, but I'm curious now. So you grew up male,
right?
You married a woman. You were married for 25 years.
I was actually married for 34, but
oh my, wow. So so you guys stuck together a while after after you coming out, before she finally said, "No mas," huh?
Right. Well,
Okay.
it was me saying, I think it's time for us.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But
anyway, so you were married for 35 years.
Yeah.
You considered yourself to be heterosexual. What is your sexual orientation at this point in your life?
I am still a heterosexual straight woman.
So you've decided to date men as opposed to women at this point.
Right.
That's an interesting switch. Most of the people that I've met and even talked to that started later in life usually end up being lesbians. So
yeah, and
if you don't mind, now you got my curiosity. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about? Because I'm very curious about this.
I get that question a lot, because
I bet you do.
Because a lot of folks, and we talk a little bit about this in our training that we offer our clients. A lot of folks don't understand that there's a difference between identity and orientation.
Oh, big time. I get mad at people. Like, they're asking me, like, okay, you're transgender now. You're going to date guys? Like, okay, why are you mixing apples and bananas?
Right.
Those are two separate things. And why are you slamming them all into the same bucket? They don't belong together. They're completely separate. They shouldn't even be in the same conversation. But
exactly.
Anyway,
yeah.
So tell us about your journey here now, if you're willing here.
So, when I share that my orientation, my sexual orientation never changed. What changed was my gender identity. Okay. And my gender identity is always measured from the context of my sexual orientation is measured from the context of my identity, because I identify as a woman and I'm attracted to men, that would make my sexual orientation straight. And I think the reason that is the case for me is that, for much of my life, I always resonated with the yin and yang energy. Okay. And as a cisgender straight male, the yin and yang energy worked for me when I was attracted to females. to women, right? But over the course of my transition, as I continued to lean into certain physical aspects of my transition with hormone therapy and different surgeries and all that kind of stuff, excuse me, I kind of the pendulum swung from women to men because that synergy, that yin and yang synergy, kind of followed my transition. And I realized in the midst of my transition that energy, if I'm with a woman, that energy was not opposite enough for it to work for me, right?
Interesting. Very interesting.
So now, I came out as trans, and so I went from straight to gay, and then over the time back to straight.
So you did start off trying to date women as a woman,
Yes,
and
I
then
did.
found that just didn't work for you.
Yeah, the energy exchange just didn't work for me. I had to have that
Wow.
complementary energy, right?
Wow.
And now when I'm dating men, it totally resonates with me.
I
You know?
could never date a man. The sun would come up in the west before I could date a man. It just would never, ever happen.
Well, trust me, that's a journey in a lot of itself too.
And yeah, that's just, just the thought of it just put shivers down my spine. No, not for me.
You can't imagine. I've started dating. I've been dating for a few years now, but
Yeah.
I can tell you that the journey around dating has, oh my God, it has been, you know what I've learned about this whole process?
What's that?
I've had to learn to love myself on a whole new level.
I think you're not going to find love outside until you figured that out first anyway, though, right?
Exactly. And I thought I hadn't discovered that, but my goodness, when I started dating and having conversations with men,
Yeah.
the questions that they would ask, the places that they would go to, like the second question or third question, it's like,
So, do you have parts down below or what?
are you serious? You really want to go there with me? So
It's
it
funny when
was,
people will ask, it's just like, really? That's where you want to start this conversation? That's where
yeah.
we're going to go.
And as a result of that, I have now put a disclaimer on my dating profile. You know, if you can't answer yes to these questions, then you might as well just swipe left.
Just keep on moving.
It's not going to work. It's not
Yeah.
going to work. So, and I've had to learn that over the course of learning how to, own me and realize that even as a transgender woman, I deserve respect and I deserve the same kind of treatment that any other cisgender woman experiences. And the reality is, I know many cisgender women experience the same thing that I experience as a trans woman, but I think as trans women, we experience an elevated level of that discrimination.
Oh, big time. So for me, with trying to date cis women is like next to impossible because I'm not a woman as far as they're concerned.
Right.
That
Yeah.
makes it really difficult for sure.
Yeah.
So another question that popped into my head as you were telling this story was, you said that day when you went to that woman's place and she got you all done up. Did you ever dress prior to that ever in your life?
I just wore like undergarments, lingerie, that kind of thing. I never
dressed up like
never dressed up. So I never got to experience the full width, breadth, and depth of what it meant.
Yeah.
What it felt like. Oh my goodness, what it felt like to see myself internally and externally aligned. And I can tell you the first time that I saw that,
Yeah.
I broke down in tears.
Yeah.
Because I finally had this alignment of something that was misaligned for almost 50 years of my life, you know? So yeah, that was a monumental moment.
That's a different version of what I've heard from other people. It's an interesting one though. For me, I 4 or 5 years old, I remember, wanting to dress up, and I asked, for like dresses and stuff and got put down right away.
Yeah.
But then when I got a little bit older and got left in the house, I would go find my mother's dresses. She had a fall that she put in her hair to go to dances and stuff. And I'd do the whole thing and I'd be like in heaven. Okay, here we go.
I would do that too, but not to that degree. I would do that in my mom's
Yeah,
clothes.
you did. Okay. So you did do it to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were growing up, was there any part of you that the world would consider feminine, or were you a man's man pretty much your whole life?
I was a man's man. No one knew a thing.
And no one would ever have a clue.
I mean, I was an athlete.
Yeah.
I played sports. I played multiple sports. I was a ladies' man. I mean, all those kind of things.
Sure.
And so, no one had a clue. Actually, I'm trying to find me in male form.
Okay.
I felt like I was a pretty decent guy,
They do have cloning technology. It's getting better and better. So
yeah. But no, I was a man's man, and no one had a clue. And I think that's one thing that blindsided so many, Jessica, who knew me pre-transition. Is like, and it threw them for such a huge loop, saying, this does not even compute. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah. How could this guy be a girl? That just
exactly.
Where is this coming from? Right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So what else do you want to tell us about transfer? You brought it up already. Transformation Journeys Worldwide, the business that you and your partner have founded and are helping the organizations and stuff. What else do you want to tell us about your company and what you're doing?
I really resonate with our work because there's more and more gender diversity that's showing up in our world. The more visible that gender diverse people are with their visibility, I think more and more organizations are recognizing, in order to be that employer of choice for all of their employees, then they've got to get on board in creating cultures of belonging for multiple intersections, right? And there's a stat out there that in 2025 the workplace is going to be made up of 75% millennials, and we know even behind the millennials, the Gen Z generation, they're even more gender diverse than the millennials, right?
1 in 5.
Yes.
1 in 5 it identifies as something other than heterosexual.
Yes. Right.
That's an amazing stat, isn't it? It's like
1
in 5. Holy.
And that is a business case. That is a business case reason for why organizations are really leaning into this conversation, because they realize in order for them to, be solvent and relevant, in just a few years, they've got to provide a culture where these folks can show up without fear or trepidation and say, I'm bringing my whole self to work. And if you can't get on board with that, I'm going to your competitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have, because of this, I think organizations are beginning to lean into this with greater intention and greater awareness that, that they've got to get on board. And, we walk away from client after client hearing stories of how our trainings just kind of transformed their perspective of the diversity of humanity, right?
Yeah.
And so what's happened over the last 7 years is, even though, 7 years ago we started with our basic Trans 101, and we still do a lot of the Trans 101 training, our curriculum portfolio has expanded substantially. So organizations are now saying, we want to continue the conversation. So what's next for us? And so what we're helping them understand is that, to create this culture of belonging, you not only have to be personally competent, understanding how to interact respectfully with gender diverse folks, you have to be culturally competent as well within your organization. You have to look at the best practices that organizations are putting in place in order to create that culture of belonging. And there are multiple stakeholders that are involved in this process: HR, DEI, talent acquisition, facilities, ERG and BRG groups. All of these different stakeholders play a role in creating that culture of belonging. So
There's a
they're
lot
real,
to it, isn't it?
yeah, they're realizing, true to our name, that this is truly a journey of inclusion, right?
Yeah, right.
And so we're really finding a lot of joy and purpose in being able to, move the needle when it comes to those conversations.
Got to be very rewarding.
I will tell you, when I wake up in the morning, I don't feel like I'm going to a job.
Yeah, sure.
I just feel like I'm living my life. And, you know, uh, I talk a little bit about, this in my book. The last chapter is finding your purpose. And for me, finding my purpose was not only doing what I love, but loving
Yep.
what I do.
Well,
And
now that you brought it up, let's talk about your book, Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity.
right.
So what was the impetus in your writing the book? What brought you to it in the first place?
That's a great question. I got my cat in the background. She's talking.
Does she want to chime in? I mean, we can.
I think she has a lot to say about
I'll
this.
bet she does. I'll bet she does.
But
Hey, does your cat know you transitioned?
no, she only knows Gabrielle.
Oh, okay. So I have a dog, and the dog is 15 and a half years old.
Okay.
I asked my ex this, so she and I had a conversation recently that was like, a long time coming, actually. And we were going through a lot of history there, and we got done, and I said to her, "So, do you think Tiki, my dog, knows I'm trans?" She goes, "That's a darn good question. I don't know the answer to that." Anyway, back to your book. Tell us, what brought you to it?
So, first of all, anytime when you write a memoir, is it, about your story?
Yeah.
For me, it was a very vulnerable effort. It's the most vulnerable effort that I've undertaken in my life because I lay it all on the line. There are things in my book that I talk about that a lot of folks don't even know about me, right? And some of the chapters in the book, I had to write them 2, 3, 4 times just to get them right. And each time I wrote it, I got more upset because I thought I was done. But I only to realize that there was more for me to say, or I needed to say it in a little different way, in a way that was more integrity, if you will. And so, as a result of writing the book, there's so many things that came up in me, like you're not good enough, or who do you think is going to read this story, and that kind of thing, right? So
Sure.
it was a lot of opportunity for growth in dealing with my growing edges, if you will. And I leaned into this project because I really feel like that it's important for us as trans people to put our best foot forward, and we need a culture to see trans people who are successful, who are not only surviving, but flourishing, thriving, and prospering, right?
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to share my story so that folks could get a perspective of what a trans life could look like, of someone who is, living authentically and trying to, leave a legacy, in this world. But I also wrote it because what I learned in my own journey of authenticity is the journey of authenticity is not necessarily unique. We all have to travel certain milestones, and we have to experience and navigate certain universal truths. Things like learning to love ourselves, things like learning to persevere through pushback, learning to listen to our heart, learning to forgive ourselves. I mean, there's so much forgiveness work that I had to do over the course of my journey, about forgiving others, about what they said or how they felt toward me, forgiving myself for, handling my transition the way it was handled. So there was a lot of forgiveness work that I had to go through. And then, of course, how do we find our purpose? How do we show up in a way that we truly know that we're making a difference in this world? So those were the two reasons that I really wanted to get this, get this project out there. So it would encourage folks to say, well, as I'm reading this, I read this in her key, but my heart, as I'm reading this, my heart is calling me to another aspect of my truth that I need to lean into, right? So
Sure.
it was more of an invitation for them to say, so what does authenticity, or what does my next step of authenticity look like for me? And I've actually created some work, some workspaces after each chapter for the reader to kind of answer some questions as it relates to their own journey of authenticity.
Did you find the book was therapeutic for you?
Yeah, yeah, it really was. I mean, it helped me. I had to do a whole lot more work that I thought that I was already, over with and done with. And for that perspective, it allowed me to lean into some spaces that I felt like I was done with. And like I said, when I had to write that it was chapter 4, when I had to write chapter 4 times before it was right, there were things about that chapter that I still had not completely gotten closure over, right?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, writing it 4 times it gave me space to navigate those difficult internal conversations and emotions that I was having,
Sure.
within myself. So yeah, it was therapeutic. And I have to say, I'm proud of how it turned out, because I'm getting a lot of good reviews and good feedback. And I feel like that it's touching the lives that it needs to touch. And I'm just grateful that I was able to do that.
Excellent. Good to hear. What else did I want to ask you? I had something else in my head that it was coming up next, and I've lost my thought. So give me a second here so I can figure it out. Oh, the TEDx. You did a TEDx. Tell us about the TEDx.
Yeah, there were about 5 years into my journey, I really wanted, there's a saying, it's important to elevate your voice and to allow your voice to be heard. And I really felt like where I was in my journey and where the world was in their understanding of the trans experience, I really wanted to tell my story. And so for about 3 years, I applied, I interviewed, I put together videos and all this kind of stuff, trying to get accepted by various TEDx entities to allow me to speak, right?
Yeah.
And each time, thank you very much for your submission, but your message is just not relevant for the conversation right now. And so after 3 years of doing that, I said, I'm just going to stop pursuing this. And if it happens, it happens. And as soon as I did this, I got a phone call. And this person had heard me speak somewhere. And she said, and she was actually one of the TEDx curators for TEDx Centennial Women here in Atlanta. And she says, we'd love for you to be a speaker at this year's TEDx. And so I wrote my TEDx out, and it was, the TEDx was, again, even though it was in the key of transgender, it was more about inviting the listener to consider, what does it mean when we get stuck, and how do we get unstuck as it relates to living an authentic life? And I talk about 3 things in that TEDx that we all have to do in order to get unstuck and live as our highest and best self. So that was the biggest stage that I've been on thus far.
Yeah.
And, I'm just grateful that I've been able to elevate my voice in that way and educate folks who tune into that TEDx and say, okay, so this is what her journey looks like.
There you go. That sounds like it was a lot of fun. I bet you enjoyed that a lot.
It was.
Tell us about what you would say to people who have transgender people in their life, maybe somebody who is transitioning or somebody who wants to transition. What would you say to people who have someone like that in their life? How can they best support those people?
I think one thing that folks who have a loved one who is transitioning can do is understand that this is not a choice. There is a decision that we have to make, but it's not a decision to be trans or gay or whatever. the decision that we have to make is to embrace who we have always been, right? To embrace our true self. And so understanding that I think it gives folks a context, a perspective that allows them to extend grace toward an individual who may be transitioning, understanding that for whatever reason, they didn't feel like that they could live authentically previously. And now that they have, for whatever reason, made the decision to say yes to their yes, understanding that it's not a choice. Another thing that, individuals can do is you can respect a person's name and pronouns. Pronouns are very important. When we use or when we identify our pronouns that work for us, we are basically telling the world, this is how I see myself. And if the world, or if especially our loved ones, if they don't reciprocate that by honoring the things that allow us to own our authentic self, like our name, like our pronouns, then basically what they're saying is I'm refusing to see you for who you are. And that is detrimental to a lot of trans individuals. Those are microaggressions for trans people. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
It may not be that first time that I'm misgendered or mispronoun, but it may be the 10th time that really gets under my skin that I get up in your face.
Yeah.
So understanding the power of language and understanding what words to say and what words not to say. Educate yourself. My goodness, because of the internet, there are so many resources out there that you can invest in your own education. And trust me, and you know this, Jessica, but as trans people, we know when someone's invested in their own education because they're not making the silly, ridiculous mistake that someone that has spent time educating themselves has and does. Yep. Right?
Exactly.
Another thing you can do is follow our lead. If you don't understand something, ask, and ask in a respectful way. We will let you know what works and what doesn't work for us. Right?
Very well said.
Follow our lead. Those are just a few examples of what I would recommend.
Excellent.
I'd also like to recommend to that individual who is transitioning, wherever you are in your own personal journey, understand that this is not a sprint. It is a marathon.
Big time.
And the more that we lean into those difficult moments of coming to terms with our authentic self, and that might be in the face of a non-welcoming family member, that may be in the face of a non-welcoming spiritual leader, that might be in the face of a non-welcoming employer. Okay, understand that navigating that dynamic is not, well, if you can't get me, then I'm done with you. That is not a realistic response, because we have to be willing to travel this journey and allow folks to travel it with us. Like I said earlier, to expect folks to turn on a dime and expect them to accept us, that doesn't work, right? So give yourself grace, give yourself permission to allow your journey to unfold organically. Yeah, be intentional in taking the steps that that you need to take that work for you. But also understand that it's not just you taking those steps. Everyone else in your circle is taking that step with you.
Wise words, for sure.
Thank you.
Gabrielle, thank you so much for taking the time today to sit with us and share your world. It's quite a story. I enjoyed this quite a bit today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. I am so grateful for the work that you're doing in elevating voices, because you're helping create a world that works for everyone. So thank you, Jessica.
Well, I hope it does help, because that's why we're doing it in the first place. And it is a passion for me.
Hear, hear.
There you go. So everybody, this is Jessica for My Transgender Nation. I thank you for listening to us today. You can find us on My Transgender Nation on Facebook, mytransgendernation.com, and obviously here on YouTube. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. And we've got some great interviews coming up again in the future. And if you have ideas, please send us a message. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about. We'll see if we can accommodate you. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.